Dear friends, Rabbi Tats, Rabbi Finches, Mrs. Tats, Mrs. Finches, welcome. Welcome to Basel. Those who are visiting us from other parts of Switzerland. Alan has thanked many of those who were involved with the organization of this incredible program. He hasn't thanked one person. Understandably, he hasn't thanked himself. It is now my honor to thank Alan and Shomrei Torah for being our partners in organizing today's event. I remember at the beginning of December when I mentioned to Alan that I had an idea. Actually, it is a consequence of one of my conversations with your wife, Dr. Abigail Nordman, about maybe organizing a medical conference here in Basel. And Alan looked at me and said, "Is Sunday the 26th of January good?" So we see over here that in America there is a company called Nike, and their motto, the slogan is "Just do it." In Basel, Alan's motto is also "Just do it." And I'm very grateful, and may Hashem continue to give you the strength and continue to give me the merit of being your partner in organizing many such incredible events. The beginning of this talk, I want to take you back to 1978 in England, and to the specific event known as the birth of one Louise Brown. Who knows Louise Brown? Louise Brown was the first, what was called then, and I'm using the terminology in the way it was used back then, it was known as the test tube baby, right? What we now call IVF. And we see that the technological and medical advancements over the last 46, 47 years have been absolutely mind-blowing, outstanding. And we can trace it all back to the Torah. We can trace it all back to the Torah because the Zohar in Parshas Vayera 117a tells us in no unequivocal terms, or in unequivocal terms, that in the 6th millennium, which is what we're living now, we are living the year 5785, the gates of wisdom above and the well springs of wisdom below will be opened. If someone went to sleep in the year 1100, at the time of the Rishonim, at the time of Rashi, at the time of the Rambam, if they went to sleep in the year 1100 and they woke up 300 years later, not much would have changed. They had no electricity. They had no running water. There was no technological advancements that would indicate to these individuals you've been sleeping for 300 years and you woke up to a new reality. However, if someone goes to sleep in 1978 and wakes up in 2025, they wake up to a completely new reality. The technological advancements are mind-blowing, the medical advancements are mind-blowing, life expectancy is far beyond anything that was previously thought as a possibility. Wealth is at a level which is completely unknown to previous generations. And with these advancements, there are a myriad of halachic questions that come to the fore, and especially in the medical field. When we talk about IVF, in vitro fertilization, for example, we have to distinguish and we have to look at the series of possibilities as to if and when IVF might be allowed, might be applicable, might be recommended, so on and so forth. So the first question that the poskim, that the legislators, the halachic legislators, had to grapple with and resolve is the following. Do we have the right to intervene when biologically a person is not necessarily able to have a child. And that question, this trigger question, in and of itself became the debate amongst halachic legislators. And you will have a school of thought saying that we are not God. God has a master plan, and it's not for us to take his place. And if God decided that this couple will have a child, they will have a child, and if God decided that this couple will not have a child, they will not have a child. And then you have this school of thought of the legislators who take a look at this Zohar that I shared with you and will say the following. If the Almighty has now given us the possibility, the halachic and the medical advancement which enables couples who would not have been able to have a child now to have a child, God has given us this incredible gift, this technological and medical advancement. This means that we should make use of these tools which are now available to us and help couples have their children. And that is the school of thought, for example, that Mori Rabbi, Rav Osher Weiss subscribes to. All of these technological advancements are there within the boundaries of halacha. They are at our disposal. But it warrants and it requires halachic oversight. If we simply take matters into our own hands without halachic guidance, then we are playing with fire. If we do it in an halachically responsible manner, consulting halachic authorities who are well versed in these specific topics, and we take the necessary guidance, then in all likelihood we will arrive at a welcome outcome, ensuring not only that the couple is happy, that a child is brought into this world, but also that the halachic process is observed, followed, complied with, and will present no further questions in the future. In halacha, every question that needs to be asked and is not asked now will resurface in the future and will need to be re-asked in a remedial manner, rather than asking a priori beforehand to ensure that there will be no problems along the way. And that is why it is so important to liaise with responsible halachic authorities when we are dealing with problems that carry questions of medical ethics, medical halacha, so on and so forth. If we talk about assisted fertility, assisted conception, IVF, so on and so forth, there are basically 8 possible types of IVF or assisted reproduction that we have to look at. The first one is an internal medical intervention, which is normally a hormonal treatment. That is probably the simplest one to deal with, giving the mother to be, hopefully, necessary hormones to enable her to get pregnant, so on and so forth, and that is one of the easiest ones to deal with. This will bring about questions in terms of Ilchos Shabbos, when you can do this treatment, when you can't do this treatment, so on and so forth, but that is probably the simplest one to deal with. The other one is artificial insemination. Artificial insemination is when the genetic material is extracted from the mother-to-be and from the father-to-be, as in the case of Louis Brown. The insemination is done artificially, externally, and then the newly fertilized embryo is reinserted into the mother with genetic material from the mother-to-be and the father-to-be. Now, that's not always possible. For various reasons, there are situations where the mother ovulates but can't carry a child to term. There are situations where the mother doesn't ovulate and would be physically able to carry a child to term. There are situations where the mother ovulates and would be able to carry a child to term, but the father-to-be can't produce his own necessary genetic material, and therefore fertilization doesn't happen, doesn't occur. All of these problems, all of these situations will bring with it alternatives. One of the alternatives in a situation where, for example, a mother ovulates but is not able to carry a child to term is surrogacy. Surrogacy, meaning that the embryo will be fertilized, the fertilized embryo containing the genetic material from this lady and her husband will be implanted in a surrogate mother, will be the carrier, and will carry this child to term, and then 9 months later she will deliver this baby, and the baby is not genetically related to her. The baby is genetically related to the one who donated or who provided the ovum and the one who donated the sperm, or who provided the sperm. Oftentimes you have a situation where I gave you the example of for example, a Jewish mother who ovulates but can't carry, and she will need to make use of a surrogate mother. So a question will be asked in terms of, should this surrogate mother be Jewish, not Jewish, and what is the status of the child in terms of the child's relationship with the mother? Who is the halachic mother of this child? And conversely, when a Jewish mother is able to carry the child to term, but doesn't ovulate and therefore needs to rely on egg donation, an egg that was donated by a third party, and we bring with it the following questions. In such a situation, should the donor be Jewish, not Jewish? What are the ramifications, and what is the status of this child in terms of the child's own Jewish identity? Who is this child's mother? Is this child Jewish or not Jewish? And what is the difference depending on whether the donor is Jewish or not Jewish, the surrogate mother is Jewish or not Jewish, so on and so forth. And then we have situations, nowadays it's become possible to do organ transplants, ovaries and uterus transplants. What if these organs were donated by a non-Jewish person? They were transplanted from a non-Jewish person into a Jewish person. What will configure, what will define whether or not the child is Jewish? Then we have situations of genetic screening to prevent severe diseases. Genetic screening, is it permitted or not permitted? And finally, something that we're not going to be talking about, the issue of cloning. Okay. Now, let me illustrate what we're talking about today with the following real life situation that my dear friend Rabbi Finches and I, it's a real case that we dealt with, I think it was maybe 5-6 years ago, Rabbi Finches, and the situation is as follows. Please, if for any reason I'm not being very clear, please stop me and ask me to repeat myself or to explain it in more clear terms, because this is very, very important. There was a non-Jewish lady, who was around 28 years old, and she was single. And this non-Jewish lady, unfortunately, she was suffering from cancer, and she needed to undergo chemotherapy. This is something that happened in the United States, in the west coast of the United States. She needed to undergo chemotherapy, and she went to see her doctor, and the doctor said, you know, the chances of recovery are very high. You are young, you know, this type of cancer is treatable, you will do chemotherapy, but there is a downside. Your chances of survival are very high, almost upwards of 95%, but the problem is, the downside is that you will not ovulate after the chemotherapy. So before starting the chemotherapy, my advice to you is that you should undergo a hormonal treatment to increase your production, your overproduction. Those ova will then be extracted and they will be frozen. And in the future, when you want to have a child, you can go to the bank and it will be inseminated, it will be implanted into you, and you'll be able to be a mother. And that's exactly what she did. That's exactly what she did. There was hormonal treatment, increasing production, the eggs were harvested, they were frozen at the age of 28, and she made a full recovery. Made a full recovery. 2 years later, at the age of 30, 31, probably she read one of Rabbi Tatz's very inspiring books, and she found the Rebbeinu, she found God. And she decided that she wanted to become Jewish. And she became Jewish. Not only did she become Jewish, she became religious. And she wanted to marry, she got married to someone, and they were living in Israel. And now they want not only to be a couple anymore, they want to be a family. And therefore, she's now making use of the frozen eggs from before she converted. And the question that we got, Rabbi Fincher's got the question and passed it on to me, and we discussed it. The question is, what is the halachic status of the child? Who is the child's mother? Why? Because the Gemara tells us that when a person converts into Judaism, the person is like a newborn child, a newborn baby, with no relation, with no pre-existing relationships with anybody. It's like a newborn child. So the situation over here, we're talking about the eggs that were harvested before she became Jewish, and then she becomes Jewish, and then the eggs will be fertilized and will be implanted into her. Why is this discussion relevant? Because there is a discussion amongst the poskim. In a situation like this, there is a discussion amongst the poskim when we're trying to determine whether a child conceived through IVF, in any situation and circumstance where either the egg donor or the carrier, the surrogate, if either one of the two is not Jewish, we have a question as to what is the halachic status of the child. What determines maternity? Who is this child's mother? Is it the egg donor, or is it the surrogate mother in whose body gestation occurs and who actually gives birth to this child? And that is a massive question in halacha. And you have halachic legislators, the great and the good, who are giving different opinions. The late Rav Elyashiv, for example. Late Rav Elyashiv is quoted in one place as saying that the egg donor, the owner of the genetic material, is the mother, is the halachic mother. And therefore, according to this opinion, if you take an egg from a Jewish woman, fertilize it, implant it into a non-Jewish carrier, the non-Jewish carrier gives birth, according to this opinion, the child will be Jewish. Why? Because the genetic material comes from a Jewish lady. So in Rav Elyashiv, the same person in one place is quoted as saying that the one who contributes with the genetic material is the halachic mother. In a different place is quoted as saying that the gestational carrier is the halachic mother, and not the one who contributed with the genetic material. The late Diane Arentory, with whom I had the merit of working for many years, I spoke to Diane Arentory about it. Diane Arentory was one of Europe's foremost halachic decisors, And he told me that he spoke to Rav Elyashiv himself about this issue. And he asked Rav Elyashiv, he says, does the Rav hold that the genetic mother, the one who contributes the genetic material, that she is the mother? So Rav Elyashiv answered, no. So Rav Dayanendra said, so the Rav holds that the one who carries the baby to term is the halachic mother. And Rav Elyashiv answered, no. So who's the mother? Not this one, not that one. Rav Elyashiv said, both. Both contribute. Both of them are contributing to the formation of this child. And he says that the child will only be unequivocally Jewish if both of them are Jewish. If one of them in this equation is not Jewish, according to Rabbi Elyashiv, we have a big question mark, and it is our responsibility to provide a solution. But this has really split up the world of poskim, of halachic legislators. The ones who say, for example, that genetics, the egg donor is the one who determines the halachic status of the child. We have amongst them, we have Rav Yaakov Ariel, who is one of the leading rabbis of the national religious community, the late Rav Ovadia Yosef, Rav Nissim Karelitz, Rav Ezra Bick, and others. They say that I received a sefer of questions and halachic answers from Dayan Tebul, the Al-Bezin of Lyon, who is an important Talmid Chacham, and he holds no questions asked. He holds that the egg, the balas of Beitziris, the egg donor, or the one who provides the egg, is the halachic mother. That's his opinion. However, on the other hand, we have Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, Rav Bleich, Rav Elyashiv, questionably the Tzitz Eliezer, who is Rav Waldenberg, Rav Moshe Tendler, who was Rav Moshe Feinstein's son-in-law, the former chief rabbi of Israel, Rav Yisrael Meir Lau, and the Nishmas Abram, an important author who is himself a doctor. They say that the birth mother is the one who will determine the Jewish status of the child. In a situation like that, if either one of the two is not Jewish, we end up with a situation known in halakha as a safek, as a doubtful situation that requires a solution. And the solution discussed by poskim is that the child needs to undergo conversion. If it is giyur lechumra, meaning a conversion for the sake of astringency, to dissipate any doubts, or if it is a giyur mi'ikar adin, if it is a normal conversion, like anyone has no affiliation to Judaism and just wants to come and join the Jewish people, that is a separate discussion that will not yield any differences in practical terms. They say in the name of the late Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that he said that he was able to find an answer, a definitive answer to any and every single one of the questions that he was asked in halacha. You as a Talmud of Rav Shlomo Zalman will understand this. He said that the only question he could not find an answer for is who is the halachic mother in this situation. Rav Osher Weiss, who is currently one of the leading poskim, he writes in a tshuva, which he wrote to me and I shared with my dear friend Rav Pinchas. He says, for a shaila like this, for a question like this question would have to be presented to the likes of Maimonides for an answer. And we don't have them anymore. And therefore, in a situation like this, the advice is that the child needs to undergo a type of conversion to ensure the Jewish status of the child. That is, if either the donor, the egg donor, or the surrogate mother, if either one of the two is not Jewish. So going back to the case at hand, to the case that we discussed, in this situation, we have the same person who is not the same person. It is the same young lady whose eggs were harvested before she went into the mikveh, but were implanted after she had come out of the mikveh and gotten married to her husband. So even though she was the same, biologically she was the same person, spiritually she was not the same person anymore. She was like two different people. And therefore, halachically, there was no difference if the eggs had been donated by a total stranger or by herself before her conversion. And in that situation, the psak that we came to, Rav Finches, was that conversion was required to dissipate any questions regarding the Jewish status of this child in the future. Now let me ask you a question. What is preferable? If a couple needs to resort to egg donation, what is preferable? That the egg donor should be Jewish or not Jewish? What would you say?
Jewish, you have the discussion of mamzeros, possible mamzeros.
So, we have yes?
I just wanted to say something about what you said before. You said that God said that when a woman cannot have a child, it was because God didn't want her to have a child.
No, I didn't say that. I said there are some who say that.
Okay, but this is actually God that don't want this woman to have a child. Now we are very far with technology, and now is the technology of human being. So suddenly God, like this woman who is not supposed to have a child, to have a child?
Oh, very good question.
Is more important than Jewish or not?
Very good question. Very good question. Very good question. Very good question. So, in the third blessing, did you understand the question? I'll say the question. It's a brilliant question. I mentioned before that there is a debate amongst the poskim, amongst the halachic legislators. Some will say we shouldn't be playing God. By the way, the same question is asked about plastic surgery, for example, if it is permissible or not permissible, and there are responses written, God made you that, that's the way God made you. If your nose is like this, and not yours. No, not something like that. But that's how God made you, and who are you to play God and reshape your ear? So there are this in terms of what is the limit? Where are the limits of how far we can go from a halachic standpoint in terms of making use of medical advancements? And this goes across many areas. So you have a school of thought, which is not the one I subscribe to. I'm very much in favor of making good use of these technological advancements in a halachically responsible way. That's my position, and I make it very clear. But there is a minority who say, listen. Now, the third blessing in the Amidah, in the Shemona Esrei, is Atah chonen le'adam da'at. We say every day, 3 times a day, that God is the one who gives us wisdom. And therefore, our technological wisdom that we have nowadays is a gift from God Himself. And therefore, He gives us the gifts, and He gives us the ability to make use of those gifts.
Of good things.
Good things. Everything, there's some, the people are normally the ones who decide, am I using this for good or not for good? That is already in our hands, but you're completely right, yes. So, in this situation over here, I see we have a Jewish audience. Yes?
Why do you need all this? It says v'rapeh rapeh, so anything in medicine you're allowed to use.
Okay, very good. So we have a pasuk in the Torah, we have a verse in the Torah, which v'rapeh rapeh, which means it's a double expression, and you shall surely cure this person. And that is what gives doctors the ability to cure people. Completely right. That is also one of the arguments that will be presented. Well, I see we have a Jewish audience over here. Why? Because normally when I give a talk and everyone is in agreement with what I'm saying, then normally someone will come up to me after the shiur and say, Rabbi, that was brilliant. I'm thinking of becoming Jewish. Normally, but when I see that we have an opinion here, an opinion there, oh Hashem, that's the basis. If you take a look at the Talmud, that's the basis of our dialectics, and that is how we develop also in our halachic thinking. So, in this specific situation over here, those who say that we should use the late Dianandra, for example, whom I quoted, he held his opinion, we should always, if we need to resort to an egg donor, we should use a non-Jewish egg donor. Non-Jewish egg donor, and then convert the child to dissipate any questions. Why? Because if we use an egg donor, there is a small possibility, albeit very, very small, a small possibility that that child may end up marrying someone that he or she is actually related to. And we have no way of keeping record of that, because there are laws of anonymity. There is an organization in the United States, somewhat under rabbinical supervision, called The Chosen One. And this organization, they were founded by an Israeli couple. I am able to disclose the information to you because it is a public company and their personal story is on their website. It is a couple who themselves struggled with fertility for many, many years, and now Baruch Hashem, they are blessed with children, and they set up a company helping couples in the same situation to have children. And they give you the option, they give applicants the option of choosing a Jewish egg donor. How is it at all possible? Why are we not concerned? Do you know why? Because they have a record of the egg donor, and that record is shared only and exclusively with the rabbinical authority, the Beis Din, responsible for that specific couple. So even though the couple themselves and the egg donor will be protected by the laws of anonymity and their identity will not be known to each other, but there is a rabbinical authority, there is a Beis Din who is aware of the identity of, for example, the egg donor, and in the future, 18, 20, 25 years from birth, when the child wishes to get married, the Beis Din is able to verify whether or not the prospective marriage partner is related to that individual. Yes?
Again, why do you need all that? I mean, there's a huge majority that it's not related. And we usually in Halacha, we go after the majority.
Exactly. Very good question. So we go after the majority, but there is something in Halacha called a bria. A bria is something that stands in and of itself. And a bria is never nullified. So we go according to the majority if everyone is together. When you separate an individual from the majority, then that is not a majority anymore. That's an individual. And therefore the laws become applicable in that specific situation. Whereas if we have a non-Jewish egg donor, then we have no questions regarding the specific child that is born. Now, that is when it comes to IVF. Baruch Hashem, we've assisted many couples already in different countries in South America and in England. We've assisted many couples, Baruch Hashem, who are now blessed with children by giving them, providing them with the right guidelines, with responsible guidelines in terms of how this has to be done. Now, a very important point that needs to be emphasized over here is the necessity for rabbinical supervision of the process. Rabbinical supervision of the process is very, very important, and nowadays it can be done. Medical professionals, specifically medical professionals in this area, are normally endowed with a great level of sensibility and sensitivity, and they understand the specific needs of the couples that they are helping. And normally, if the couple is able to say, we need to do this under rabbinical supervision, normally, in our experience in London, is that 10 out of 10 times when this was mentioned, the clinic was very understanding and very amenable, and just like, I'm not comparing one and the other, but just for the sake of simplicity, just like when we're producing kosher food, there is a mashgiach present. Also in this reproduction process, we can have a mashgiach process to ensure every step of the way that there are no mishaps, no missed steps that needed to be complied with. Now, in IVF, a very important aspect of IVF is not only reproduction in the sense of enabling a couple to have a child when they would not be able to have that child through normal means. There is also IVF for the sake of genetic screening. I corresponded a while ago with Rabbi Professor Abraham Steinberg, who is a leading rabbi and medical doctor in Israel at Shari Tzedek, and the specific question I was asked was about the permissibility of doing genetic screening for something called the Fragile X syndrome, which is a serious genetical mutation that brings with it a series of unwanted health problems, which can be life-threatening, life-limiting, so on and so forth. Now, of course, it goes without saying that genetic screening is not allowed just because I want to have a blonde child with blue eyes. That would be playing God, right? But if we are talking about a situation where genetic screening will prevent a very serious disease from being carried forth, that is absolutely allowed. But that will bring with it another halachic question, which is also connected to normal IVF, normal in vitro fertilization, which is the following. What do you do normally in a situation like this? You have many embryos that are produced. Many embryos that are produced. Some of them are implanted and the rest of them are frozen. What do you do with the fertilized embryos after a child is already born to a family, and maybe it is not uncommon in IVF to give birth to twins and triplets and what have you, and the family decides, that's it, I don't need the frozen embryos anymore. That is a halachic question. What do you do with those frozen embryos? Can you simply discard them? Can you give them to someone else? Can you donate them to someone else, to a couple who might be experiencing the same problems? Can you give them this genetic material? So this is also a halachic question, and Baruch Hashem, the halachic legislators have dealt with every single one of the steps of this specific halachic question from beginning to end, and are very well prepared to give the necessary assistance to couples who are in this situation and to help them in the best possible way.
Is this embryo older than 40 or less than 40 days?
Oh, very good. So, Rabbi Daniel Brunswick asks a very important question. Is this embryo older than 40 days or younger than 40 days? And he's alluding to a Gemara. And the Gemara says that before 40 days, the embryo is like water. It's like water, and therefore, if there is a miscarriage or anything like that, nothing really major happened. Now, since the embryo has not been implanted, has been fertilized and frozen, it is not even in the situation of being older than 40 days or younger than 40 days. But it is a viable embryo nevertheless. And if we take into consideration, I saw a hand coming up there, I'll come to you in a second. If we take into consideration the prohibition of wanton emission, the sperm was extracted with a very specific goal, which is to have a fertilized embryo. And that Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked in a situation where the whole process has to be extraneous to the body and everything is IVF, everything is fertilized in the test tube. Understandably, we need to extract genetic material from both the wife and the husband. The husband's extraction became in and of itself a halachic question. And therefore, that is not wanton production for no purpose whatsoever. Rather, there is a very specific purpose. It is being extracted for the production of a fertilized embryo. But the discarding of what do you do? Do you let it thaw? You unfreeze it? These are relevant and serious halachic questions that, Baruch Hashem, as I mentioned, thank God, the poskim, the halachic legislators have dealt with and have provided the necessary guidance. Yes.
My question's already been answered. I wanted to know from how you count those 40 days to see from this point where the efforts have been created or developmentally, it's already been answered. Thank you.
Very good, very good, very good. Excellent. Okay, I am conscious of not overstepping my allotted time. Dr. Norman, I have 5 minutes for Q&A. When is Rabbi Fincher starting?
8 minutes.
Okay, so I will open the floor now for questions, please. Yes, Ms. Rothschild.
You mentioned the question, Jewish or non-Jewish but the same applies to artificial insemination. Should the donor of the semen be Jewish or non-Jewish, but for a healthy Jewish woman?
Very good. Very good question. Very good question. So, I was asked 6 months ago, I was asked the following question. A couple were in a situation where the husband was barren. The husband couldn't produce any sperm and therefore the husband couldn't father a child. And there is a halachic question which is more complicated than egg donation, and that is sperm donation. And this couple, they relied on sperm, it happened in America, the couple relied on sperm donation by a donor whose identity is unknown. And the mother ended up having triplets, as I mentioned, and one of the triplets, I'm talking about a religious family, and the father, he brought them up exactly as his children, there was no difference whatsoever. And the situation was not necessarily, it's not something you go telling, it doesn't come on, Tachlis will not publish, that this is what happened to this family. It's normally a very private matter. So a shidduch was suggested for the young lady. One of the triplets was a young lady. A shidduch was suggested, and they went out for a number of times, and they really felt, that you, my soulmate, we need to make this official. The question is that he was a Kohen. He was a Kohen. And the question is, can a Kohen marry someone in that situation? And again, my dear friend Rabbi Finches and I, we corresponded about this, and there are tshuvas. Rav Osher Weiss has written a tshuva, but most importantly, Rav Ovadia Yosef has written a tshuva about it. And he says that in that situation, in a situation where the pregnancy comes through sperm donation, where there was no physical contact whatsoever between this married lady and a third person, it was simple insemination, that the child is absolutely kosher, and if it is a woman, she can marry a Kohen without any problems whatsoever. So that is the long answer with a real case that I was asked about 6-7 months ago to answer your question. Now it's fascinating when Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote this responsa in the 60s, 70s, he was attacked left, right and center by some groups within the Jewish community who were of the opinion that this can't be done. This can't be done. How can you allow this woman to be inseminated with sperm from a donor who is not her husband, this and the other? And 60 years later, the specific community who really fought against Rav Moshe Feinstein, they are one of the greatest beneficiaries of his halachic ruling. Yes. Yes.
Now, concerning the possible relationship between the donor and the woman, also there, if the donor is a man, is it also preferable to have a non-Jewish donor because it could be a family relation afterwards because they're also anonymous?
You're completely right.
And the second question, you mentioned genetic screening.
Mhm.
Wouldn't it be also be possible to use genetic screening to just exclude family relationship between
Very good, very good.
donor and the huge family?
Very good. Okay, that's the questions over here were about genetic screening, and if we can use also genetic screening like DNA testing to know who is the father of the child and to rule out any possibility of marrying someone who you are related to. So in the first question is, it would be equally preferable to use a non-Jewish donor according to the same reasoning. According to the same reasoning, it would be equally preferable to use a non-Jewish donor. And the topic, which is maybe would be also, it's one of the shiurim that I give, which is DNA testing in halacha. And DNA testing for the sake of establishing paternity is not allowed. For the sake of establishing identity, for example, when a husband goes missing, and it happened with the Twin Towers in 2001, husbands went missing, so DNA testing to identify remains of people who didn't come back home, that was done. Because that ends up conferring something positive for those who are waiting for their loved ones. And by the way, after the 7th of October, it was also used. But for the sake of determining paternity, it is not allowed. There was a mix-up in an Israeli hospital in Tel Aviv in the early 80s, and Rav Ovadia Yosef and Rosh Zalman allowed DNA testing to be taken because 2 babies were born and they were mixed with 2 different families. So Rav Ovadia Yosef allowed, and Rav Shmuel Zalman, they allowed DNA testing to be done by taking DNA from the mother, not from the father, from the mother. Why? Because when it comes to paternity, we have very clear halachas in Shulchan Aruch. Acknowledgement means paternity. That's it. Okay? Yes, Walter Soel.
1 second, 1 second.
It's really small. I wanted to ask if the gender might be, it's allowed to choose the gender. And, you do the check, the DNA check, and so the couple can, I want to have a boy or a girl.
Okay. So that is not halachically permitted. There is something we're not going to talk about today, which is a situation where a child might end up having 2 mothers, which is mitochondrial replacement. You know, there are specific diseases that are carried through the mitochondria, and you can have a situation where the bulk of the genetic material will come from one lady, but the mitochondria will come from, but she may be carrying lolein or genetic mutation, and the mitochondria will be extracted and replaced with a healthy mitochondria from another donor. And that is the situation where you might end up having 2 mothers, because both of them, but the same is true when it comes to the gestational mother and to the egg donor, so on and so forth. Now, I've given you a very tip of the iceberg kind of example in this year. These halachic topics in halachic parlance, they are known as Mayim She'ein Ba'em Sof. It's like an endless source of water that we can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're still scratching the tip of the iceberg. But be that as it may, I hope that I was able to give you an overview of this very important halachic topic. The rabbinate of the IGB is at your service. Should you know anyone who is in the situation who might benefit from our halachic guidance, we are here at your service. It's one of the many services that the Rabbinate is proud to provide to this wonderful community that we call home. And I will now thank you once again and hand it over to my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Fincher Schlitter. Thank you so much.